Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week, we will take a look at the top football coaches in Europe. Which manager is shining the brightest across different leagues? Who is leading the way of how football is played today? For this chat, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Tian Yu and Brandon Yates. All right, let's kick things off with our main event today, the best coach across Europe. We're not just looking at, who's top of the table, but who's maximizing their resources across different leagues. Tian Yu, you might lean more towards, Xabi Alonso with his, revolutionary work with Real Madrid, or it can be Michel at Girona, orchestrating one of the most improbable, title challenges in La Liga. And let's not forget the established masters, Pep Guardiola, Hansi Flick, or those rising figures like Vincent Kompany or Mikel Arteta. So Tian Yu, who gets your votes for the most impressive managerial performance so far this season?
Well, I think it's still early in the season, so it's a bit tough to crown the best coach right now. But if we look at the early signs, I would say Andoni Iraola at Bournemouth. On paper, they should have been fighting relegation right now because they've sold out players like Dean Huijsen to Madrid, Kerkez to Liverpool, and Zabarni to PSG. They've literally sold out their defensive line. But look at how they've responded now. Upsetting Spurs, beating Brighton, and giving Liverpool all kinds of problems in the games. I think that's down to coaching, and he's literally squeezing the best out of what he has and just setting the team up really smartly. Also, as a Madrid fan, since if you touch on that, I can't leave out Xabi Alonso.
Of course.
The club made huge signings, but Alonso, what he has done is to inject a sense of discipline and structure, especially in pressing and defending. The way he's motivated Kylian Mbappe to press and just to work harder has been a real shift. And you can see a new energy in the squad. And I think as the season goes on, Alonso's influence will actually show even more.
Yeah, I remember Mbappe being late for a training session for 2 minutes made the sports headlines in one day. So that's remarkable. Just tells you how disciplined this team is under Xabi Alonso. Brandon, which coach do you think has done the best so far this season?
Look, I think if we look at this season, and it is so incredibly early on, I think all of the names that Tian Yu mentioned there are definitely the correct choices for this early on in the season. But I think because it is so, because it is the beginning stages of the season, I'm going to be a little bit naughty and look back at last season as well. Because I think we have to acknowledge some of the success that clubs had last season. And if we're looking at last season and the early stages of this season, I think it still has to be Luis Enrique, right? What he's been able to do at PSG, I think that his case is overwhelming, delivering them a first Champions League trophy and collected the men's, Coach of the Year trophy and reshaping players, particularly Dembele, like we've already, spoken about in previous chats, taking him from like kind of a seemingly unused talent to now a leader on and off the field and a Ballon d'Or winner. So I think, what Luis Enrique has been able to do at PSG with a combination of silverware, tactical retooling, and player development, which I think is massive when you analyze a coach's ability, I think has been absolutely massive. And, the consistent levels of effort that he's been able to get out of his PSG players every single game, no matter who they're playing against, no matter what the scoreline is, I think has been absolutely massive. I think, the tactical acumen and flexibility that we've seen at PSG, the absolutely immense performances that he was able to get out of players that were kind of on the fringes and forgotten about by world football, I think it's been absolutely massive. The squad transformation and what he's been able to do in the short term and the long term with PSG has been absolutely immense last season. Whether that translates into further success this season remains to be seen, although the early signs do look pretty good for PSG. But yeah, I think the way that Luis Enrique has been able to absolutely reshape PSG after so many years of disappointment, after so much money spent, taking a squad kind of misfits and turning them into some of the greatest players in the world in their positions. I know Donnarumma has now left and joined Manchester City, but like what he was able to get out of the likes of Donnarumma, Hakimi, Vitinha, Dembele, the emergence of Desiree Doué, and the tactics that were seen and the levels of effort and kind of that squad ethos that Luis Enrique was able to get out of that PSG squad and seems to be able to do this season as well. I think Luis Enrique deserves immense credit for this remarkable turnaround that we've seen from PSG, particularly on the European stage, which is something that PSG have been so desperate for in terms of claiming European success for so many years. And Luis Enrique has been the man that's finally gotten them over that hurdle and could continue to do so as the years progress.
Right. PSG has seen so many world-renowned coaches taking charge of them for so many years, but I think it's truly Luis Enrique who has built this dynasty of PSG in European football. And I think this season, actually, Vincent Kompany has done a relatively good job in his second season with Bayern Munich. The best example would be the Champions League victory against Chelsea. In that match, when everyone thought Bayern would, play more on the right to rely on Olise to exploit the attack, they actually played more on the left. That move just took Chelsea by surprise and disrupted their pre-game plan. And when Bayern initiated the attack from behind, actually forward Kane and Serge Gnabry behind him would actually draw back and reinforce the midfielders and receive the ball. And meanwhile, the two side backs, Stanisic and Laimer, would actually go forward, sprint forward to take their positions in front. That confused the Chelsea defenders a lot. Yeah. Should I keep guarding Harry Kane, or should I hold my position to keep an eye on the two side backs? So that's the winning formula for that match for Bayern. It's just one match, but I think it just tells you how Vincent Kompany is good at targeting their opponents, because Chelsea was using the same strategy against PSG in the Club World Cup final against the Bayern that night, but Vincent Kompany dealt with that very well.
Yes.
So I think Vincent Kompany's Bayern looks very sharp this season. But speaking of tactics, for years, high pressing and possession-based play were the gold standards. Mm-hmm. But are we seeing a shift? Because, now it could be a mix of many game strategies, like the role of the traditional fullbacks or even goalkeepers continues to evolve into an inverted playmaker, and something like more teams are focusing more on transition games. So, Tianyu, what's the tactical innovation or trend that you think is leading the way right now in football?
Well, I think, like you said, we are past the era where possession football or tiki-taka style is the absolute standard. Because you still see teams that want to dominate the ball, but more and more, the real damage is being done in transitions. And that moment when the ball changes hands, that's where games are won or lost right now. Because you just take the recent Man City versus Arsenal game as an example. Instead of using his usual ball possession dominant game, Pep Guardiola actually played more cautiously because he was letting Arsenal have the ball at more times. And City's biggest threats in the game actually came on the counter when they won the ball high up. But then, in the final minutes, Arsenal hit them back with the same way. They actually cut off City's pass and transitioned really quickly, and Martinelli finished it beautifully after a long pass from Eze. So I think what I want to say is that possession is still important because it wears teams down and sets the stage. But the most decisive moments now come in those transition phases. And that's the trend, I would say, across Europe at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that many teams are now mixing things up, between possession game and the counter-attack, like teams like Bayern Munich, but they still have possession-based play. But when they lose ball in front, they don't panic. They reorganize their defense very quickly in front to create the transition situation, to create chances. I think that's a very popular trend now in Europe. Brandon, are there any tactics that could sound bizarre if put 10 years ago, but now is leading the trend?
I'm not sure if there's anything that's particularly bizarre or shockingly different from what we've seen in the past. I think that what we are recognizing now is that a single style of play is just not going to be enough to generate success anymore. I think the clubs that are doing incredibly well at the moment kind of have a hybrid approach, or are able to implement multiple tactics at the same time, or kind of change things around depending on what's going on in the game or what sort of opposition they're facing. And I think a couple of coaches and teams are having greater success in terms of flexibility than other coaches. But for me, I think the hybrid template is pretty massive. So for example, intelligent high intensity pressing combined with positional flexibility and half space overloads. I think teams are now kind of combining counter pressing with inverted fullbacks, roaming attackers, for example, like false nines and inside wingers, like we've seen Dembele be able to do with great success at PSG. So I think that overall result of sort of this hybrid approach and mixing things up, I think that possession definitely matters, but it only matters when it creates half space penetrations or press trigger transitions. So I think, you guys have also touched on that, that notion that possession still matters, but you have to do something with it, and you also have to be very productive without the ball. And I think that a lot of clubs are recognizing that as well. So I think clubs that are also able to switch between structured possession and vertical half space strikes are getting the edge. So to kind of summarize that approach, I think that pressing with positional rotation and half space exploitation, I think that seems to be the kind of modern approach that is working across multiple leagues and multiple competitions at this point in time. So I think a couple of coaches, Arne Slot, Hansi Flick, Luis Enrique,
Vincent Kompany.
His names escape me now. Yeah, Vincent Kompany. Thank you. Yeah. So I think a couple of these, modern coaches that are able to shift things around and not just have this one-minded, one tactic, one formation approach, like Ruben Amorim, they seem to be having a lot more success than managers that just stick to one style and one approach and hope for the best with that. So I think that being flexible, being able to do a lot with and without the ball, and be intentional with what you're doing as opposed to just kind of keeping hold of the ball and hoping for the best, that seems to be the best way forward right now. So I think football's evolving, tactics are evolving, and the coaches and clubs that are keeping up with that are going to be the ones that are going to achieve long-term success. And even in the short term, we're already seeing that coaches that are able to adapt and have intent with their tactics, not just holding onto the ball and hoping for the best, those are the ones that are achieving the best success right now.
Yeah, it seems like with these tactical changes, the top teams now require all of their players to, everyone should play other functions.
Yeah.
Everyone is able to play all roles. Like now, defensive players can be playmakers, even goalkeepers. And the forwards, the strikers, should be the first defender of the team. That you can see Harry Kane tackling the opponent's defenders all the time, chasing the ball all over the pitch. So that's very interesting. It's very similar to what happened to basketball in the NBA when the big men are required to, shoot threes, and the smaller guards can be able to, guard those centers.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how these two sports are evolving now. It's a very similar trend. All right, before we move on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. Novak Djokovic became the oldest player to reach the quarterfinals in an ATP Masters 1000 tournament at 38 years and 4 months. The milestone came after he defeated Spain's Jaume Muna in the men's singles round of 16 at the Shanghai Masters on Tuesday. The previous record was held by old rival Roger Federer, who advanced to the last stage in Shanghai in 2019 at 38 years and 2 months. 2 goals from Mohamed Salah helped Egypt seal their spot at next summer's FIFA World Cup with a 3-0 win over Djibouti. The result means Egypt cannot be caught at the top of CAF Group A and head to their fourth World Cup. Former Barcelona defender and Spanish international Jordi Alba has announced that he will retire from professional football at the end of the current MLS season. The 36-year-old made 459 appearances for Barcelona. He also earned 93 caps for Spain and was part of their Euro 2012 winning side. Cristiano Ronaldo has become football's first billionaire player, according to Bloomberg. It says Ronaldo's net worth is £1.04 billion and that he has earned over £410 million in salary between 2002 and 2023. La Liga has confirmed that match between Villarreal and FC Barcelona, scheduled to be played on December 20th, will instead be played at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, the United States. The plan continues to face mixed reaction from fan groups in Spain.
Games should be in this land. So, for example, La Liga play in Spain and Bundesliga play in Germany or Premier League in England. So I think they should stay in their countries.
There are a lot of fans in Latin America, and we see that Barca, which is one of the best teams in the world, one of the best clubs, generates very dedicated fan base. So it is really cool that such a big team is getting closer to that market, because there are also many of us who love Barca and want to see them close by.
Real Madrid has criticized the move, arguing that playing the game in Miami, where most fans are expected to support Barcelona, would turn one of Barcelona's toughest away fixtures into a virtual home match. The Uzbekistan Football Association has confirmed that Italian Fabio Cannavaro has been appointed as head coach of the Uzbekistan national team. Cannavaro previously had coached in China and briefly led the Chinese national football team. He has been a free agent since leaving Dinamo Zagreb in April. Chinese rookie Yang Hansen made his debut at Portland Trail Blazers in the NBA preseason and bagged 4 points, 4 rebounds and 1 assist against the Golden State Warriors. He was fouled out in the fourth quarter. Portland selected Yang with their 16th draft pick this summer. Welcome back. Now time for a spicy debate. The term anti-football gets thrown around a lot these days, often aimed at managers like Bordalas at Getafe or legendary figures like Jose Mourinho and Diego Simeone. They tend to play a lot of defensive football, injecting the result-oriented mentality into their teams. For example, Getafe's game is always, they're even sometimes ugly to watch, but they can always win points. You can see a lot of goalless draws from them.
Yeah.
So Tianyu, is anti-football a fair label, or is it just a different, equally valid form of winning games?
Well, I don't really agree with that label. People say defensive football is the easy way for smaller teams, but honestly, it's one of the hardest styles to pull off. Defending well takes so much discipline. If you watch teams like Getafe or Atletico Madrid, their backlines move like an army, shifting together, closing spaces, pressing differently depending on their opponents. I think that takes countless of hours of work on the training ground. And defending, I think, isn't less tiring. If anything, it's actually more draining than attacking, because you are reacting to your opponents and you're covering constantly. To do that successfully, a coach has to be very detailed with roles and instructions. So I wouldn't say it's anti-football. I think it's just a different kind of football. Honestly, defensive football can also be beautiful. If you watch clips of past matches of Real Madrid, I think what's impressed me the most is the Madrid team under Mourinho. Because those lightning-fast counterattacks in the early 2010s were some of the most thrilling football I've ever seen. The beautiful counterattacks initiated by Benzema, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Kaká could also be very beautiful. I don't think it's fair to call them anti-football. I think it's just another way to win. And in football, winning is what counts the most.
Right. Brandon, the problem is like teams like Getafe, sometimes they play 5-5-0 formation. They have no desire of attack whatsoever to win the game. All they want, goalless draw. Are these coaches misunderstood pragmatists, or do their methods genuinely harm the spirit of the games?
That's the thing, right? I don't necessarily think it harms the spirit of the game or is anti-football. I think anti-football for me is a little bit of a fan slur rather than a tactical diagnosis. I think that any sort of tactic that brings variety to the sport or brings success to smaller teams against giant opposition, I think is a good thing for the sport. I think
Yeah.
variety is always good. I think smaller teams having a chance against teams with bigger budgets and bigger squads, I think is a good thing. I mean, it's definitely frustrating for bigger teams that would easily dispatch some of these teams if they were playing the same style of football as them. But, if I'm a smaller team and a manager of one of these clubs, I wouldn't care. I need to do what's best for my team and my club and try and guarantee protection from relegation or getting the best possible results that I can. So I think a lot of these coaches that we've mentioned, I mean, obviously, like Mourinho and Simeone, I think they might have more questions to answer than some of the other teams because obviously they've managed some of the biggest clubs with the biggest budgets in the world. But I think that a lot of these coaches prioritize organization, transitions, set pieces, and risk control. So I think that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think a lot of that is driven by squad profile and more critically result maximization. So I think it's kind of a fine line because I think pragmatism and negative aesthetics aren't the same thing, but I think there is quite a fine line between the two of them. I think sometimes those systems are coherent, repeatable, and definitely most critically effective, as we've seen in particular with Mourinho and Diego Simeone, who have been able to achieve very high levels of consistent success despite what some might view as, negative or anti-football tactics. So if anti-football means doesn't look pretty, I'm okay with that. But I think if that's a critique of legitimacy, I think that it kind of falls short. I think that football is made up of many valid philosophies.
Yeah.
To dismiss one as immoral, I think, is to ignore that winning football has a tactical diversity. And I think that, in the last point that we covered, I think tactical diversity is something that we are embracing more and more in the football world. I think the more that we see tactical diversity when it comes to pretty football and attacking football, I think that will be more appreciated by the fans. But look, when it comes to a more defensive approach, whether you call it pragmatic or defensive first, I think is up to you. But I don't necessarily think it's anti-football. I think if all teams and all clubs had this approach, football may fall flat on its face and then something might need to be done about it. But I think if you've got certain teams that are using it to their success, particularly when it comes to avoiding getting absolutely destroyed by certain teams and when it comes to surviving a relegation battle or getting a result in tight matches that could determine a season, I think that just adds to the excitement of football, and I think variety is definitely the spice of life.
Right. If we take a look at the smaller sides like Getafe, they have little budget compared to those giants. All they can is to survive in a league that is commercialized, full of monopoly by big giants. Sometimes the asking price of one player of a powerhouse like Real Madrid could equal the whole value of a smaller side like Getafe. I think it's fair to play sometimes ugly football to get points. Finally, let's talk about the influence of the manager itself. In an age of super clubs, data analysis, and squads packed with superstars, what is the true impact of a coach? Brandon, is their role more profound than ever in today's football, or have they become more of a facilitator of the game?
Look, I think wherever you look at football or however it evolves over the years, I think the role of the coach is still going to be incredibly important. I think that, I mean, depending on the situation and the club ethos, I think whichever way you look at it, I think, a manager or a coach or however you want to label it, I think they still kind of oversee the overall running of the club, whether it comes to tactics, player acquisition, or, moving on certain players. Even though football has evolved, I think still a lot of these old school approaches to football I still think are going to be incredibly important to determine a club's success. I don't think however football changes over the years, I don't think the role of a manager or a head coach or a first team coach, I don't think any of those roles will be undermined by however, modern sport progresses. I think that having someone at the helm that kind of directs the future of a club is still going to be incredibly important. And I think that we are seeing that still to this day, that the role of, whoever's at the helm is still incredibly important for how a team does, or for turning a team around, or how to handle a high profile exit like with Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, or with how Luis Enrique has been able to completely reshape the ethos and the approach of a club like PSG. So I think that the role of a manager for a club's success going forward, whether it's at a small club trying to avoid relegation or whether it's at a super club trying to claim Champions League glory, I think it's still going to be incredibly important to have the right man at the helm going forward, no matter how football changes.
Okay, Tianyu, managers like Pep Guardiola are known for dictating every detail of the game, of the team. But does that mean today's coaches have more say over 90 minutes on the pitch? How much of an impact do you think coaches now have in deciding football games? Because sometimes we know the games are decided by superstars.
Yeah, but I would actually say coaches still have a massive impact, because maybe even more than before. Because these days, I mean, like you said, most super clubs are stacked with talent. So I think what separates them isn't just players, it's how the coach sets them up. Like small details like which passing lanes to use, who marks who on the set pieces, and when to press in the games. That's all the manager's fingerprints. So I think we've seen teams transformed by a coach's ideas, and we've also seen teams fall apart because of stubborn managers. I think we might have a little idea what we are talking about right now, but that influence hasn't gone away. Back in the old days, I mean, coaches were more about discipline, training, and building team spirits, because tactics weren't as developed as now. But nowadays, while some of those duties are shared across, bigger staffs, the head coach is still the one at the helm, who is still the one steering the ship. Even in the era of superstars and data, the manager is still the key figure who turns talent into real results.
Right. Let's see which coach will lead his team to the biggest glories in Europe this season, and how managers will influence football games. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.